Shajar has to be one of the most misunderstood commanders in Rise of Kingdoms, not only because she's doing mighty healing, which is a mechanic that's relatively new to us, she's also doing true damage, which is a mechanic that's relatively new to us, and the way her skills work is going to be surprising to you. I'll show you in just a minute. In fact, so surprising that I published a video, realized I had something wrong, took the video down, and now I'm republishing it with the correct information. Holy cow. Now, this information is based not only in my actually having taken this commander to 5551 and having actually tested with that and with an expertise version of the commander, but also then spending a shocking amount of time, and I do mean shocking amount of time, now going back, double checking all the logs and confirming the way she actually works. And if somehow I still got something wrong, leave a comment. So in this video, use the timestamps to navigate to whatever part you'd like. If you're subscribed, you know I always drop those timestamps, and I always test commanders as soon as they land in game. So consider smashing subscribe. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the way her skills actually work, because they're super different than how other commanders work. And it was also really confusing for me, so much so that, well, you'll see. And then we'll talk about the duel results. Then we'll talk about the 5v5 results. Then we'll talk about whether or not you should invest in her. Wow. Okay. So let's start with how her skills work, shall we? The active skill. Look, I'm not going to read all the skills to you. Okay? Not again. But I'll say this. For the next 10 seconds, whenever she heals, and the language here is going to really matter. So it's whenever this commander heals a target, they deal 80% of heal strength as true damage, okay, to a target troop. And then she heals. She also slows, but whatever. So there's several things here that are really critical. The first is that it turns out it is whenever she heals a target. Man, this is really complicated to figure out with the way that the logs look. And there were several clues that ultimately led me to this conclusion. I will get there. Let me share the other part of this, okay? The other part of this skill that's really unusual is that the way it works is that unlike every other buff in the game from an active skill, which applies on the next turn, this buff applies this turn. So she buffs herself and in that same turn heals herself. And because the buff applied this turn, she deals true damage to the target. And I will show this to you in the log very, very briefly, because I think it is absolutely worth looking at very, very briefly, just to show you. We look at this Barb report, which is going to be super relevant in a minute here. We go to her active skill. She is the secondary commander. We scroll on down. Okay, she casts Tree of Life. Joan of Arc gained Tree of Life damage effect, takes effect this turn. Okay, takes effect this turn. That is unusual. And there's Tree of Life damage from Shajar. Okay, this is unusual because if I scroll up, you can look at Joan's buffs. They all say takes effect at the start of the next turn. Okay, so her buff applies the turn she casts it. She heals herself. She does true damage. But she does more, and it's complicated, and we need to talk about it. Which is that Shajar also does something when an active skill is used. There's a cooldown of 3 seconds. So this is basically once per skill cycle. But she heals herself and 2 other nearby things. Technically, she heals 3 things in total. But whenever you have a skill that gives a buff, you always target your march first as the priority. Then your other marches as the priority. Then and only then other players' marches if they're allied to you as a priority, right? So this effect is really cool because when she heals your march and 2 others from this skill, she will do damage 3 times. Now, the way that we figured out that Shajar healing other units would make her do more damage, true damage, to her target is very simple. We had a duel going on, and we had 2 wounded units chilling outside of the AoE, but within range of Shajar. You can see on screen that when she heals the other units, there's going to be a bunch of red numbers on the screen. And I can show this to you in the log. Let me pull one up. So here you can see in the log, Tree of Life damage triggered 3 times for the exact same amount, which should mean that the 3 targets were healed for the same amount-ish, and that the true damage, like mighty healing and true damage, I don't know. I think that's all. It's so complicated. I'm pretty sure that's all sort of working the way that we would have expected. All right. So 3 triggers of this, because Ashurbanipal, who was the primary, used his active skill, and there were 3 things to heal, herself and 2 others, we have the 3 triggers of damage here on the Tree of Life damage. If there's nothing to heal, by the way, then you didn't heal any other units at all, and then, therefore, you wouldn't get those triggers. As it turns out, it's actually somewhat complicated to prove to you that Shajar's healing only triggers the damage if she is healing and is the commander initiating the heal. So I paired with Joan of Arc. Her 4th skill reads that she's got a 10% chance to trigger healing. Here is that healing Holy Refuge. I wanted to see if it would trigger Shajar's damage, and it did not. So this is significant. Tree of Life is active, okay? And theoretically, whenever this commander heals a target, well, it's not the commander pairing. It is Shajar specifically. So the reason this is so complicated is that in the live stream, people were seeing red damage numbers when we were doing all kinds of different commander combos. Like, for example, we tested Boudica Prime with Shajar. We tested Richard I with Shajar. And the thing that was so surprising is we were like, oh, look at that. You see the true damage being dealt. But no, it wasn't the true damage dealt. What it was Shajar's 3rd skill that heals herself and 2 nearby friendos. And that was what the true damage was. So anyways, all that to say, looking at the logs is a complicated endeavor, and I think that whoever you pair Shajar with, their healing does not count toward triggers for this damage, all right? And I would assume that, now I want to go test this, that even healing talents would not trigger it, from the defense tree, for example. Because technically, it will be the other commander, not the Shajar. God, now I really want to test it. All right, so here's the Charles Martel with Shajar. This is going to be so interesting. So the Charles uses his active skill. He is going to heal himself. Shajar is going to heal him. Then Shajar does her heal, and there was some damage. And then we're going to see Shajar's 3rd skill, but only 1 smite trigger, or one true damage trigger there. See? So the talents from Martel are healing him. We should see 2 red numbers there, but we only saw 1. All right? It's wild. All right, and I can prove this to you in the log in just a minute here. But yeah, the talent from Charles not triggering the healing true damage from Shajar. Let's go look at the log. So here we are on turn 19. It's the 2nd skill cycle. Charles is going for the 2nd time. We see that Tree of Life is active. So theoretically, if this were to work, we'd see 2 triggers of Tree of Life damage, but we have only 1. 1 from Shajar's 3rd skill, and then none for Medicinal Supplies talent. GG's, friends. GG's. So at least now we understand how Shajar actually works. Only her own healing to herself or other units will count for this damage. That means that skills or talents from the other commander do not seem to count. We also learned that the effect applies the exact same turn that she casts it. We learned that this will do, 3rd skill, will do the damage even for healing her friends, which is awesome. And, of course, 4th skill over here we haven't really talked about, but this is yet another heal, which also should trigger the damage. We need to go into the log to prove. But at the end of the day, all these ideas about how the commander works, none of it really matters if the test results aren't exciting. So what are the test results, Cheesy? And this is kind of why you're subscribed to the channel. is that I go in and I test this stuff and we try to figure it out. And the first round of tests was with the 555-1 Shajar, okay? And we tried her as the primary. We tried her as the secondary. I think generally speaking, secondary was more exciting. I'll flip through sort of some of these reports. But the big thing that we learned as we started to do these duels is that you'd get into these situations like you see here, where she would win the duel, but lose the trade. And how does that happen? Well, this is the issue with healing. She's bringing back troops, then those troops get wounded again. And so if you're in a losing situation, healing makes a losing situation even worse. If you're in a winning situation, yeah, I mean, it is good for that winning situation. But if you value winning over trades, Shajar looks good. And if you were sitting there thinking like, well, there are no situations where I would value winning over trades, here's two that probably matter a lot. One would be, well, maybe matter. Canyon is one situation, and Ark of Osiris is another. You care about winning and not trades in those situations. And, you know, even burns in KVK on flags, swarming or whatever, like, you may care more about the burn than the quality of the trade that it took to get it. It all depends on the nature of your KVK. So all that to say that as a 5-5-5-1, we could get some wins here against certain combos. We tested without equipment. We tested without armaments. We tested without, obviously, inscriptions if there's no armament. For the most part, we had no formation on at all. With few exceptions, we might have left the formation on, but had all the armaments off. And, oh god, we got cooked by the cavalry. And a part of the reason here we get cooked with the Boudica is that there's not actually a synergy that I thought was here, where Boudica's fourth skill healing would trigger Shajar's damage. And if you're watching the battle, it will look like it was triggered, but it wasn't. That's just her third skill. Ooh, it's complicated. All right. My conclusion about heal disruption, by the way, is that Alexander the Great sees additional value now, but I don't think Ramses and Gilgamesh are coming back, in my opinion, even though they won this trade, which is actually kind of hilarious. I still don't think they're back in a meaningful way. GG's. And the reason we tested with Ashurbanipal and Shajar is because I don't think you break apart the Zhuge Liang and the Hermann Prime. I think they're a great combo. And so if we're talking about putting Shajar somewhere, it's probably the second march. And therefore, we're sort of asking, well, who do we get rid of in that second march? The meta second march is going to be Ash with Nebu. Nebu is sort of the 1.0 version of Ashurbanipal. So yeah, you slice off the Nebu, you put in the Shajar, and you try that. All right. We got absolutely cooked by these calves. Holy smokes. Tried with a Trajan. Trajan got kind of roasted, but I will point out I am using 5-5-5-1 Shajar in Canyon now, and it's performing better, I think, than my Mulan was. So that's kind of noteworthy. We tried with the Shajar Esong, and hey man, this got kind of close, but the Sevs were brutal. And I think there's another report here. Here it is, Richard I. This is the one where I was like, man, this thing got cooked. Why didn't Richard healing trigger Shajar true damage? Well, we know now that it isn't. When we were watching the battle, we thought it was, because again, when you look at the battle, you see some damage show up, but what's happening is that you see here, there's medicinal supplies. So that's the talent related to healing. Then there's that Dew of Devotion, third skill on Shajar. That is triggering the Tree of Life damage. So you see a red number show up, and until you realize you should see multiple red numbers showing up for that to count, there should be 2 red numbers there. I am pretty sure. Gosh darn it. I don't want to have to make another video about this. I am pretty sure that we will see separate triggers for each instance of damage. We do not see that, and therefore it's GG's. It is GG's. In fact, here's Richard's heal, Soul of the Crusaders. So we should have seen 3 triggers here. A 3,336 heal, the 714 heal, the 1,520 heal. And keep in mind, right? Like there's a little bit of weirdness around the number of units healed and the true damage dealt. We don't need to get into that for now. All right. For now, we'll just say Richard doesn't work, and just another healing commander in general doesn't work because it won't trigger the true damage. Holy smoke. One final duel here, maybe two, before we go into 5v5 results and expertise results, is this William Wallace Liu chat absolutely decimated the Herman. We tried Herman. I did not think it did very well. I think Ash did better than Herman did. So I really feel strongly that you keep Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime together. And then over here, we did Zhuge Liang and Shajar with Zhuge Liang and Herman, and the Zhuge Liang with Herman won. So it's like, man, like why would I break them apart? I don't think you do. All right. But then we went to the expertise Shajar tests, and she gets a lot better. Like, look at this. Liu Che primary, Wallace secondary, and we lost. This has got to be like the best March in the game. I would flip it the other way. Wallace is the primary, is the way I prefer to run it. But like, if you maxed Wallace, you know, this thing absolutely cooks the Liu Che. And we lost the Asher Benapal with Shajar. Other dual results here. Wallace primary Liu Che with the Ash Shajar, 26 to about 36. We go to the next one. 24 to almost 41 here. That's just brutal, man. What do we got next? Oh, a Shajar primary. Actually did pretty legit. Shajar primary with Zhuge Liang. So when we used her in healing mode, not so good with Zhuge Liang. But in damage mode, actually won. But lost the trade. But lost the trade. GG's. Herman Prime, as I mentioned, just not do great with the Shajar. And then, okay, from here I've got Barb reports. So before we get into this sort of testing I did to really confirm the way the skills work, let's talk about 5v5s. So a lot of people complain about duels as a way of measuring a commander's strength because, hey, look, it doesn't account for AoE and all these other effects. So we try to do some 5v5 duels. And the thing we did in the 5v5 duel is we kept literally everything the same. Talents are the same, the combos are the same, but I use Nebu. He uses expertise Shajar. Big shout out again to PTI for expertising Shajar for testing this. And what we want to see is the Shajar team winning more than Team Nebu, right? Because if everything else is the same, and we have the same kill order, and literally everything else is the same, then theoretically we should observe an effect above and beyond randomness. And spoiler alert, we did not. We tested a bunch of times. Sometimes he won, sometimes I won. Could not distinguish using Shajar instead of Nebu as a secondary to Asher Benapal, apart from the randomness of where the marches were physically positioned. Which brings us to the conclusions. Should you work on Shajar or not? And, the acronym I used on stream for her was SAD. Oh, boy. Too true, isn't it? Too true. So let's talk about if you should invest in her. There's got to be one of two things true to work on her now. You either need to believe that the future of archers will continue to be this healing synergy, and pushing that synergy will be major, or you're building a new archer march right now, and you needed a new commander anyways. And let me explain. If you already have Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime sorted out, and you've got Asher Benapal, you're like, hey, what's the fourth archer? I mean, don't start a Nebu project now, do Shajar. That's really easy. Even if you're like starting your second archer march and you're wondering, who do I pick first? I would pick Shajar over Ash at this point, because I believe this second thing I said is going to be true, which is that the future of archers is going to focus on healing. And what does that mean? Well, the future has two things. First of all, there's this Mightiest Governor commander coming up. But second of all, let's talk about the broader commander cycle. When we had infantry, we got Smite commanders, Gorgo and Liu Che. They were the only ones. And then a year later, we got Skippy and we got Wallace. All right. And the Smite synergy is wicked. And the Wallace Liu Che is the strongest march in the game. Thing's crazy. All right. I love this march. So good. So all that to say, you could probably expect within a year from now that we're going to get archers, and those archers are going to have the big healing synergy needed here. So the thing that Shajar misses that would make her instantly open field viable all on her own is some sort of major debuff. The thing that she does have is a nice buff. That's cool. Herself and 2 other targets when she's awakened. She heals herself and her friends, and they gain defense and more normal damage. But she also is missing area of effect damage, right? And so if she had AoE damage, even without doing debuffs, she's got buffs, she'd be gangbuster. Everyone would probably be raving. But she doesn't have that, okay? Now, you can get cool synergy with CY and SAD. And unfortunately, it would have been really insane if her heals triggered the effect from his area of effect true damage that he does. And I thought that's what was going to be the case, and that's why, in part, I took the video down as like, actually, now that I've studied the logs more, that synergy is not there. So when he specifically as a commander heals, he will do AoE damage, and when she specifically as a commander heals, she will do single target true damage. But pairing them together does not trigger each other's true damage, presumably. And I assume that his effect here will stack with her effect, but like we honestly don't know. So you're really looking to probably not the short-term, immediate, imminent future of this mightiest governor commander in the open field, although I think they'll be good together. But I think over the course of a year, if you work on Circle, which is the formation that enhances healing, and you work on Shajar, you'll probably be happy with the commander that shows up. But I don't like to deal in the possibility of a thing happening in the future because every now and then you can just get racked. In fact, one of the things I'm sort of left wondering is, realistically, how many of these formations can we actually work on and get powerful inscriptions for? I think this is a huge part of the reason and why I think the design is elegant on this active skill, making it so that if you want, you can use her in skill damage. And if what you really believe is that the future of archers is going to be in this healing direction, right? Like if you're really pot committed, then one way to approach it for your first archer march would be to use Shajar as the primary and Zhuge Liang as the secondary. But like, that's if you're starting to invest in archers today and you're just getting to Season of Conquest and you really are imagining that the future, even for one archer march, is going to be healing. And we just don't know what that's going to look like. Hard to say. GG's. So if you enjoyed the vid, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. And if you want to see all the testing as it unfolded on stream, check the cards here and here. These videos take a shocking amount of work because it's not just my opinion. I actually spend a ridiculous amount of time looking in these logs to sort stuff out. And then even after I've spent a ridiculous amount of time, I go back and I learn new stuff. GG's. So consider subscribing and throwing a like on here and check out the streams.